Eli Marin jolted awake to the sound of his daughter screaming, the old shack trembling as if something enormous had punched the ground outside. He threw the blanket aside and rushed to Myra's cot. Her wide eyes reflected the blaze streaking across the desert sky. "Dad!" she gasped, pointing through the cracked window. A column of flame carved its way downward, brighter than both moons, trailing sparks like torn cloth unraveling. It hit the horizon with a thunderclap that rattled the walls, and then the night went eerily still. Dust hung in the air. Eli held his daughter close until her breathing steadied. "Asteroid," he muttered, more to calm her than himself. But deep down, he knew the truth. Rocks didn't burn like that. That had been a ship, something massive, bleeding fire. By dawn, the desert was buzzing with rumors. At the scrapyard, miners and scavengers argued over whether it had been pirates, a corporate freighter gone rogue, or just a chunk of space debris. Eli kept his mouth shut, tightening a bolt on a rusted hauler engine, while his daughter perched nearby, swinging her legs. "You're thinking about it," Mira said knowingly. "I'm thinking about how to keep us fed this week," Eli replied, wiping his hands on a rag. She gave him that look, too smart for 10 years old, too much like her mother. "We could go look. Before anyone else does. Mira. You always say if you're first to salvage, you get the good parts." Eli sighed. She wasn't wrong. Out here, on a forgotten colony run by a corporation that cared more about quotas than people, survival depended on what you could pull from the bones of old machines. If the crash really was a ship, the overseers would seal it off by midday. Whatever lay inside would vanish into corporate vaults, never to be seen again. By mid-morning, he gave in. He loaded their rover with water and tools. Mira practically bounced in her seat as the engine coughed to life. The desert stretched before them, flat and endless, until the horizon began to shimmer with a faint, unnatural glow. They found the wreck half buried in a canyon. It wasn't like any vessel Eli had ever seen. The hull rose higher than buildings, curved and seamless, as though it had grown rather than been built. Lines of crystal ran across its surface like veins, pulsing faintly with inner light. Even broken, it radiated power. "Dad," Mira whispered, silencing her. "Stay close," he said. His hands itched to touch the surface, to understand how it was made. He carried a cutting torch, half expecting the metal to resist. But as he pressed the tool to a warp seam, the material parted almost willingly, folding back with a hiss. Inside smelled of ozone and something sharper, like charged air before a storm. The corridors curved unnaturally, smooth and flowing, etched with symbols that shifted when his eyes lingered too long. Lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows. They moved carefully. Every instinct screamed danger, yet curiosity pulled him deeper. Somewhere within, something groaned, a sound not of metal, but of something alive. In a chamber torn open by impact, Eli froze. A figure lay against the wall, armor cracked, skin glowing faintly beneath it. She was enormous, easily 9 feet tall, her frame built of muscle and elegance. Her features were alien yet unmistakably regal. Sharp lines, pale silver eyes, skin with an iridescent sheen like polished stone. A crown-like crest of bone jutted from her brow. When her gaze found him, it was like being pinned by a predator. "You," she said, her voice low but resonant, every syllable laced with command. Eli instinctively stepped in front of Mira. "We mean no harm." The alien's lip curled. "Primitives, scavengers." She tried to rise, but pain forced her back. Despite the insult, Eli moved closer. Years of working machines gave him an eye for damage, and her body was a machine of its own, leaking dark, viscous fluid from a gash near her ribs. "Dad, she's hurt," Mira whispered. "I can see that," Eli muttered. He dropped his pack, pulling out a sealant spray and a strip of cloth. The alien's eyes narrowed as he approached. "You dare touch me? You want to bleed out here?" He didn't wait for permission. Kneeling, he pressed the cloth against the wound. She flinched, a low growl in her throat, but didn't stop him. Mira crouched nearby, studying her. "What's your name?" The alien hesitated, as though unused to the question. Finally, Serenia! Serenia! Mira repeated with a smile, as if trying the word on her tongue. Serenia's gaze softened for just a fraction of a second. Then she turned back to Eli. This vessel must be restored. The enemy hunts me still. Eli shook his head. Lady, I don't even know how this thing flies. I'm just a mechanic. Her eyes narrowed. You repaired my body. You will repair my ship. Patchwork's one thing. This? He gestured around at the alien architecture. This is beyond me. You underestimate yourself, she said, wincing as she adjusted against the wall. But I see it in your hands. The way you looked at the hull. Machines speak to you. Eli didn't answer. His daughter's hand slipped into his, small and trusting. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing harder than ever. A flicker from a nearby console drew his eye. Instinctively, he touched it, and the panel flared alive, symbols rearranging into patterns he almost understood. Then came a burst of static and a sharp tone. Serenia's expression turned grim. They are searching. Who? My uncle's hunters, she said, voice tight. They will scour this world until I am ash and silence. Eli's mouth went dry. He had no stake in alien royalty or their wars. All he wanted was to keep Mira safe. But here, in this broken ship, with this wounded alien princess staring at him like his choice mattered more than he could comprehend, he realized walking away wasn't going to be simple. The distant sky rumbled again. This time, it wasn't an impact. It was engines. Eli tightened his grip on Myra's hand. Serenia's silver eyes locked onto his. Mechanic, she said, her voice sharp despite the pain. Your choice now decides whether we live or die. After hauling Mira back to their shack, he sat at the table staring at his tools. The memory of silver eyes burned behind his lids. He wanted to forget the alien lying in that wreck, bleeding and commanding like a queen out of place. He wanted to tell himself she'd survive without him, or that helping her was impossible. But Myra's words kept circling. She'll die without us, Dad. By morning, he gave up pretending. They returned to the canyon, carrying more supplies than before. The wreck looked different in daylight, still vast and broken, but less like a nightmare and more like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Serenia hadn't moved far. She was propped against the wall of her ship, pale but alert. When she saw them, her mouth curled faintly. So, the mechanic returns. Don't flatter yourself, Eli muttered, kneeling beside her. I came to keep a kid's conscience clean. Mira darted forward with water. Serenia accepted it stiffly, her long fingers dwarfing the flask. She drank like someone unused to needing help. You shouldn't have come back, Serenia said once she finished. Funny, you're the one asking me to fix your ship. Her lips tightened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she gestured toward the console flickering weakly. The systems decay. If they fall silent, the beacon dies, and with it, any chance I have. Eli crouched before the panel. Its surface rippled under his touch, reacting to his presence. The symbols didn't make sense, but he recognized patterns, circuits, energy routes, core stabilizers. Machines had a way of speaking, even across species. You expect me to put this back together with a wrench and some scrap? You built life from death when you sealed my wound. You will do so again, Serenia said. Eli sighed. You're not great at asking nicely, are you? I am not accustomed to asking at all, she admitted, her gaze sliding to Mira, who was tracing alien carvings with a finger. Your offspring, she trusts so easily. She's a kid, Eli said. World hasn't beaten that out of her yet. For the first time, Serenia's expression softened. She watched Mira for a long moment before shifting her focus back to him. Begin with the energy conduits. The damage is severe. Eli got to work, prying open a ruptured housing. Inside, he found strands of crystal filaments, delicate as spiderwebs, shattered where the ship had slammed into the canyon wall. He pulled out wire from his pack, crude by comparison, and began splicing. Serenia watched with skeptical intensity. That will not hold, she warned. Then it'll hold long enough, he countered, tightening the makeshift joint. Hours passed in tense silence. He worked, Serena observed. Mira asked questions neither fully understood. At one point, Eli caught Serena studying him, not with disdain this time, but with something like curiosity. Why do you labor for me? She asked suddenly. Because you'll die if I don't, Eli said without looking up. There is more. He paused, then shrugged. Because my daughter asked me to. That's reason enough. Serena tilted her head, as though this answer baffled her. You would risk much for the will of a child? For her? Always. His tone brooked no debate. A sound cut through the air. Engines. Not alien this time, but human. Eli cursed under his breath and motioned for Mira to stay quiet. He scrambled out of the wreck, crouching behind jagged hull plating. A patrol skimmer descended into the canyon, emblazoned with the corporate crest. Two men in dust-stained uniforms jumped out, rifles slung casually but ready. Thought we saw smoke, one said, scanning the wreck. Big haul if this is what I think it is. Eli stepped out before they could get closer, raising a hand. Careful. Radiation pockets everywhere. Things half melted from the inside out. You get too close, your skin'll slew off. The patrolman frowned. And you know that how? I'm the colony mechanic. Look, I already checked. It's junk. Pretty sure, but worthless. Save yourself the trouble. The men exchanged doubtful looks. One kicked at the sand, squinting at the wreck's looming shadow. After a moment, they climbed back into the skimmer. If it's worth something and you're lying, Marin, don't think the overseer won't hear about it. Eli plastered on a thin smile. Wouldn't dream of it. The skimmer rose, vanishing into the haze. Only when the sound faded did he let out a long breath. Inside, Serena studied him with unreadable eyes. You lied for me. Seemed smarter than letting them find you. You endangered yourself. If they return. They won't. Eli interrupted, though his tone lacked certainty. He slumped against the wall, exhausted. Not yet. Serena was silent, her gaze flicking to Mira. The girl had crept back to her side, chattering about constellations painted on the ship's ceiling. Serena listened, regal face strangely softened by the child's innocent awe. Later, when Mira curled up to nap, Serena's voice dropped low. I owe you truth. I am no mere traveler. I am heir to a throne that spans stars. My uncle sent assassins. This world was meant to be my grave. Eli blinked, digesting that. So you're what? A princess? Her chin lifted. A sovereign. A power your kind cannot yet fathom. Eli rubbed his temples. Terrific. I pick up a wounded stranger and it turns out she's space royalty. Should have guessed. Now you see the danger, Serena said. If word spreads that I live, fleets will come. And they will not spare you. He looked at Mira, sleeping peacefully against the alien wall. A cold knot tightened in his chest. He wanted to walk away, to take his daughter and vanish before the storm broke. But he knew the storm had already found them. Then we keep you alive, he said finally. At least long enough for me to figure out how not to get us killed. Serena's silver eyes lingered on him. For the first time, she inclined her head in something like respect. Then we are bound, mechanic. Until fate decides otherwise. The night deepened. The wreck hummed faintly, patch systems flickering to life under Eli's crude repairs. Outside, the desert lay quiet, but far above, something vast stirred in orbit, hunters drawing nearer. And though Eli didn't yet know it, his choice had just painted a target on both their lives. Eli felt them through the sand before he heard the roar overhead. He froze at the ship's entrance, spanner slipping from his grip. Mira scrambled up from where she'd been sketching alien patterns in the dirt. Even Serena straightened, her wounds forgotten. Engines split the sky, low, heavy, predatory. Searchlights slashed across the canyon walls, turning night to raw daylight. They found me, Serena said, voice cold but sharp with urgency. No time remains. Eli snatched Mira close. His heart hammered so hard he barely heard himself think. How many? Serenia closed her eyes briefly, listening to vibrations only she could sense. 3 hunter ships. Drones ahead of them. They combed the colony, burning fields, silencing witnesses. They will not leave without proof. Damn it! Eli looked around the shattered chamber, wires sparking where he'd patched with crude copper. Half her systems were limping, the rest dead. Running wasn't possible, not with this wreck grounded. Serenia's gaze met his. The cloak must rise. Even crippled, it can shield us. Not with what I've got. He snapped. Then improvise as you did before. He wanted to argue, but Myra's small fingers tightened on his sleeve. There wasn't time for doubt. He bolted for the console. The panel flickered under his hands, symbols reordering as though they recognized his desperation. He tore open the conduit, splicing alien crystal strands with scavenged wire. Sparks spat across his knuckles. Serenia stood at his back, her massive frame braced against the trembling walls. Faster. You want faster, grab a tool. To his surprise, she did. Her long hands, too precise for someone so injured, held components steady while he welded. Their movements fell into rhythm, human pragmatism meeting alien precision. Mira crawled into a side conduit, nimble and fearless, feeding cables where either of them could reach. The ship groaned alive. Panels flared, lights racing across the crystalline walls. For a heartbeat, Eli felt triumph. Then a thunderous impact shook the canyon, showering them with dust. Outside, a drone had landed. Its metal limbs scraped stone as it unfolded, a mechanical beast sniffing the air. Its searchlight swept the wreck's entrance. Dad, Mira whispered, voice trembling. Eli pulled her out of the conduit and shoved her behind a fractured console. Stay low. Don't move. The drone crawled closer, claws gouging rock. Serenia reached for her weapon, but her armor was fractured, her blade half broken. Eli's eyes darted to his tools. His hand closed on a cutting torch. As the drone lurched inside, he ignited it with a sharp hiss. Blue flame burst forth. The machine pivoted, sensors flaring red. Over here, you tin bastard! Eli muttered, and swung. The torch bit into the drone's joint, spraying molten shards. It shrieked, mechanical limbs thrashing. Serenia surged forward despite her injuries, driving her cracked blade through its core. The drone convulsed and collapsed, smoke filling the chamber. Before Eli could breathe, Serenia staggered, clutching her side. He caught her weight. More will come, she said hoarsely. My uncle's gaze is near. As if summoned, a new voice filled the chamber. Not sound, but presence. Holographic light blossomed across the wall. A towering figure appeared, broad-shouldered, crowned in jagged metal, eyes burning like molten steel. Serenia! His voice was velvet and venom. You live. How inconvenient! Serenia straightened despite her wounds. Uncle! Zaratha's gaze shifted, landing on Eli with thinly veiled disdain. And what is this? A simian meddling where he doesn't belong? Eli met his stare, anger overriding fear. I'm the guy who just killed your toy. Zaratha's laugh was low, cruel. Bold for livestock. Do you believe you matter? One order, and your colony burns. Eli's jaw clenched. He wanted to shout, to curse, but Myra's frightened eyes caught his. He forced calm into his voice. You don't get to threaten my kid. Not while I breathe. For a fleeting second, Serenia's expression flickered, surprise, even admiration. Zarath leaned forward, sneer deepening. You think fatherhood makes you strong? It makes you weak. Easy to break. The hologram cut as the canyon shook again. Hunter ships descended, their engines ripping the air. Systems online? Eli barked, diving back to the console. Tell me this cloak works, because we're out of time. Serenia laid her palm against a panel. Alien glyphs burned bright, resonating with her touch. The ship's skin shimmered, light bending, the wreck vanishing into the desert as though swallowed by shadow. The hunters swept past overhead, spotlights slicing across empty sand. For agonizing minutes they searched, circling like wolves. Inside, the ship hummed faintly, cloaked but trembling under the strain of Eli's crude splices. Sweat stung his eyes. If a single joint failed, the whole thing would collapse. Mira clutched his arm. "Dad, are we safe?" He couldn't lie. For now. The hunters circled once more, then peeled away, engines fading toward the horizon. Only when silence returned did Eli sag against the console, breath shaking. Serenia lowered herself carefully, exhaustion playing on her regal features. She looked at him, not as a primitive, not as a nuisance, but as something she hadn't expected. "You defied him," she said softly. "No subject of my empire would dare." "I'm not your subject," Eli replied. "I'm a dad. That's all." Her silver eyes lingered on Mira, then back to him. "Perhaps that is what the galaxy needs. Not thrones. Not fleets. Just that." Eli didn't answer. He stared at the stars through a crack in the hull, the night deceptively calm. But he knew this wasn't over. They had survived the first hunt. The war had only just found them,